My name is Kaysen, and this is the story of how I discovered the truth about my wife in the most devastating way possible. I worked as a plumber in Detroit, while my wife Emily taught English at a private school. We'd been married for 9 years and I believed we were the perfect couple. God, how wrong I was. It all started with a strange phone call to my work number 6 months ago. A woman's voice that seemed familiar yet foreign at the same time. "Your wife is not who she pretends to be," the stranger said and hung up. I thought it was a mistake or a prank. But something in that woman's voice made me suspicious. The next day I received a text from an unknown number. "Check her phone. Secret chat app." I knew this app. It automatically deletes messages after a certain period. When Emily went to shower, I quickly checked her phone. The app was there, hidden in a folder called Work Programs. But it was password protected. I tried our wedding date, didn't work. Her birthday, also no. Then I tried the birthday of her first boyfriend from school, whom she sometimes mentioned. The app opened. There was only one active conversation. No name, just a number. The last message was sent 2 days ago. "Miss you. When will we meet again?" My heart started racing. I quickly closed the app and put the phone back. All evening I tried to act normal, but my thoughts kept spinning around that message. The following weeks I watched Emily very carefully. She didn't change outwardly, didn't start behaving differently. But now I noticed little things: how she hid her phone when I entered the room, how often she checked messages, how sometimes she smiled while looking at the screen. After a month, I decided to hire a private investigator. A former cop named Frank agreed to help. But what he discovered exceeded my worst fears. Emily was indeed meeting someone. But not one man. 3. Simultaneously. Frank showed me photographs. Emily with different men in different places around the city. Cafes, parks, hotels. She was living a double, no quadruple life. The first was Austin from the gym, as I suspected. A young trainer she met every Tuesday and Thursday. The second was Liam, owner of a small art gallery. They saw each other on Saturdays when I supposedly worked overtime. The third, and this was the biggest shock, was Marcus, our family doctor. A man we trusted with our health, whom I even considered a friend and invited to barbecues. To each of them, Emily told different stories about herself. She told Austin she was divorcing me, but the process was dragging out due to property issues. She told Liam that we'd been living like brother and sister for 5 years, and that I knew about her affairs. She told Marcus that I had a terminal illness and doctors gave me maximum 1 year to live. Reading Frank's report, I felt reality crumbling around me. 9 years of life with a person I didn't know at all. 9 years of lies, a carefully woven web of deception. But the worst was yet to come. Frank continued his investigation and discovered that Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning my murder. She had a fourth lover, a hired killer named Derek, whom she'd paid half the sum in advance. The plan was simple: stage an accident at work. I often worked in basements of old buildings fixing pipes. Supposedly an old support beam wouldn't hold and concrete blocks would crush me. Emily wanted to collect the insurance, $200,000, and start a new life with one of her lovers. But she hadn't yet decided which one. When Frank told me this, I felt not anger but a kind of cold calm. She had crossed a line beyond which there was no return. I decided to play my own game. First, I secretly installed cameras throughout the house. Tiny, invisible devices that recorded everything. Then I started playing the role of an unsuspecting husband, but with one addition: I began documenting her every move. I learned her meeting schedule and started appearing in unexpected places. Not to confront, but to gather evidence. I photographed her with her lovers. Recorded conversations. Collected receipts from hotels and restaurants. But most importantly, I found out about the plan to kill me and started preparing. Through Frank, I made contact with Derek. It turned out he wasn't a professional killer, but just an ordinary drug addict who agreed to the crime for money. I offered him double the amount to tell me everything and play his role in my revenge plan. D-Day was set for Friday. Emily told me she was going to visit her mother for the weekend. In reality, she planned to spend those days with Austin, celebrating my death and planning the future. That day I went to work as usual. But instead of driving to a client, I went to a suburban motel I'd booked in advance. Derek was supposed to crush me at 4 o'clock in the basement of an old house on Maple Street. At 4 p.m., Derek called Emily and reported that the job was done. He said everything looked like an accident and that police were already on scene. Emily played her role perfectly. She rushed to the scene of tragedy, cried in front of the police officers, played the grief-stricken widow. But the police officers were Frank's friends who agreed to help with the setup. They told her that the body was trapped under debris and that special equipment would be needed to retrieve it. The process would take several days. Meanwhile, she could go home and wait for news. Emily went straight to Austin's. They celebrated all night. Frank caught it all on camera. The next day she started calling the insurance company, inquiring about the claims process. She met with a lawyer to discuss the will. She even started choosing flowers for the funeral, the cheapest ones she could find. Meanwhile, I was living comfortably in my motel room, watching everything unfold through the cameras I'd installed at home. I saw her going through my personal belongings, already planning what to sell and what to keep. I watched her practice her grieving widow act in the mirror. But the most disgusting part was watching her with Austin. The way she laughed, the way she celebrated my supposed death. She wasn't grieving, she was euphoric. 9 years of marriage meant nothing to her. On Sunday evening, when she returned home after her romantic weekend with Austin, a surprise was waiting for her. I was sitting in the living room in my favorite chair, reading the newspaper. When she walked in and saw me, she literally fainted. Collapsed right there in the hallway. When she came to, I calmly said, "Hi, honey. How was your weekend?" She couldn't utter a single word. She stared at me like I was a ghost. "Are you surprised I'm alive?" I continued. "I'm surprised how quickly you recovered from my death. You even managed to celebrate with Austin." I showed her a folder with photographs, conversation recordings, documents about her affairs and the plan for my murder. "You know what's funniest?" I said. "Derek turned out to be more honest than you. At least he openly said he wanted to kill me for money. But you played the loving wife for 9 years. Emily tried to explain something, but I interrupted her. "Tomorrow morning you'll take your things and leave here forever. Divorce papers have already been filed. Copies of all evidence have been given to the police and FBI. You'll be charged with conspiracy to commit murder." But the main surprise was waiting for her the next morning. All 3 of her lovers received envelopes in the mail with photographs and documents proving her betrayal to each of them. Austin found out she was simultaneously sleeping with the doctor and gallery owner. Liam learned she was planning my murder. Marcus discovered that all the stories about my illness were lies. None of them wanted to see her again. But I saved the biggest blow for last. When Emily was packing her things, I told her, "By the way, that woman who called me 6 months ago and warned me about you? That was Stephanie, your colleague, the one you supposedly discussed school programs with. Turns out she'd known about your affairs for a long time and decided to tell me when she learned about the plan for my murder from Marcus." He confided in her because they were also seeing each other. Emily went pale. She realized her own web of lies had tangled up and destroyed her. During the following days, more details emerged that made the situation even more complex and twisted than I initially thought. Frank's investigation revealed that Emily's deception went far deeper than just the affairs and murder plot. She had been systematically stealing money from our joint accounts for over 2 years. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there, but it added up to nearly $15,000. She'd opened a secret bank account under her maiden name and had been funneling money there to fund her multiple relationships. The gifts she bought for her lovers, the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, all of it was paid for with money she stole from our marriage. Money I earned working long hours in cramped basements and crawl spaces, fixing other people's problems while she was creating her own web of deceit. But that wasn't all. Frank discovered that Emily had been forging my signature on documents. She'd taken out a credit card in my name and maxed it out, another $12,000 in debt I knew nothing about. She'd even tried to take out a second mortgage on our house, but thankfully the bank required both our signatures in person. When I confronted her about the financial fraud, she finally broke down completely. The facade of the grieving widow, the confused wife, the woman who made mistakes, all of it crumbled. What emerged was someone I truly didn't recognize. "You don't understand," she screamed at me, her face twisted with rage. "You're boring. You come home tired, you watch TV, you go to bed. You never take me anywhere exciting, never surprise me. These men made me feel alive again. So you decided to kill me for it?" I asked calmly. "I never meant for it to go that far," she sobbed. "Derek was supposed to just scare you, make you think about what you could lose. But then he kept asking for more money, and he said the only way to make real money was to go through with it." Even in her confession, she was still lying. Frank had recordings of her conversations with Derek where she explicitly discussed my death and how to make it look accidental. There was no ambiguity, no misunderstanding. She wanted me dead. The trial became a media sensation. A suburban housewife leading a quadruple life, stealing money and plotting murder, it had all the elements that local news loved. Emily's photo was on the front page of the Detroit Free Press with the headline, "Teacher's Deadly Lessons." During the proceedings, even more sordid details emerged. Austin testified that Emily had told him I was abusive and that she feared for her life. She'd shown him fake bruises, makeup applied skillfully to look like finger marks on her arms. She'd played the victim so convincingly that Austin actually felt sorry for her and offered to confront me himself. Liam's testimony revealed that Emily had convinced him she was a widow. She told him her first husband had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and that she was finally ready to love again. She wore black to their first few dates and spoke tearfully about her loss. When he wanted to meet her family and friends, she said she'd move to Detroit to start fresh and leave the painful memories behind. Marcus's testimony was perhaps the most damaging. As our family doctor, he had access to my medical records. Emily had asked him to alter them, to add symptoms and test results that would support her story about my terminal illness. When he refused, she seduced him, using their affair as leverage to get what she wanted. She told me that if I didn't help her, she'd report me to the medical board for inappropriate relations with a patient's spouse, Marcus testified, his career already in ruins. I was trapped. I thought if I gave her some fake test results showing early signs of illness, it would buy me time to figure out how to end the relationship. But Emily had used those fake medical documents to convince her other lovers that I was dying naturally, making her plan to kill me seem unnecessary to them while she moved forward with Derek. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court painted a picture of someone with severe narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathic tendencies. Dr. Sarah Chin, the psychiatrist who evaluated Emily, testified that she showed no genuine remorse for her actions. Mrs. Johnson expressed regret only about being caught, Dr. Chin stated. When asked about the impact on her husband, she focused primarily on how the situation had affected her own life and reputation. She showed classic signs of someone who views other people as objects to be manipulated for her own benefit. Derek, the would-be hitman, received a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During his testimony, he revealed the chilling details of how Emily had convinced him to take the job. She made it seem like a mercy killing, Derek said from the witness stand, his voice barely audible. She told me he was suffering, that the doctor said he only had months to live anyway. She said she couldn't bear to watch him waste away. She made me think I was doing something compassionate. Of course, Derek's drug addiction and criminal history made him unreliable, and Emily's lawyers tried to use this to their advantage. But the recordings Frank had made of Emily's conversations were clear evidence of her true intentions. The most damaging piece of evidence was a recording from the cameras I'd installed in our bedroom. 3 days before my supposed death, Emily was on the phone with someone. We later learned it was Austin, and she was discussing what she'd do with the insurance money. $200,000 is just the beginning, she said, lying in the bed we'd shared for 9 years. Once the house sells, and with his 401k in the savings, we're talking about almost $500,000. We could buy that place in California you showed me, start completely fresh. She paused, listening to Austin's response, then laughed, a sound I'd once found beautiful but now made my skin crawl. He won't be a problem much longer. Derek promised me it'll look completely natural. Poor Kaysen, working so hard in those dangerous old buildings. Accidents happen all the time in construction. When this recording was played in court, several jurors visibly recoiled. Emily's own mother, who had been supporting her throughout the trial, got up and left the courtroom in tears. The defense tried to argue that Emily was suffering from severe depression and that her judgment was impaired. They brought in experts who testified about the psychological effects of feeling trapped in a loveless marriage. But the prosecution's case was too strong. The financial fraud alone would have been enough to send her to prison. The affair with our doctor raised additional charges of conspiracy and fraud. But the attempted murder charge carried the heaviest sentence. During the sentencing phase, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd prepared extensively for this moment, but when I stood up in that courtroom and looked at Emily, really looked at her for the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a strange sense of peace. Your Honor, I began, I've spent months trying to understand how someone I loved, someone I trusted with my life, could plan my death so callously. I've read the psychological reports, listened to the expert testimony, tried to find some explanation that would help me make sense of this betrayal. I paused, looking directly at Emily. She was staring at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. But I've realized that understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Emily Johnson didn't just plan to kill me, she planned to erase me. She was already living as if I didn't exist, building relationships based on lies about my death or my supposed abuse or my fictional terminal illness. In her mind, I was already gone. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Emily's quiet sobbing. The woman I married died sometime during these past few years, replaced by someone capable of unimaginable cruelty. I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for justice not just for me but for everyone she manipulated and deceived. Austin, Liam, Marcus, Derek, we were all victims of her deception. Emily was sentenced to 25 years to life for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, with additional sentences for fraud, forgery, and identity theft to run concurrently. The judge, an elderly woman with kind eyes but a steel spine, delivered the sentence with no emotion. Mrs. Johnson, you have shown a callous disregard for human life and dignity that this court finds deeply disturbing. Your actions were not crimes of passion or desperation, but calculated decisions made over an extended period. You will serve a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. As they led Emily away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes, not remorse but surprise. She was surprised that there were consequences for her actions. Even then, even facing decades in prison, she seemed shocked that her manipulations had finally failed. The aftermath was almost as difficult as the discovery itself. Our mutual friends were divided. Some believed Emily's version of events, that I was somehow abusive or neglectful, that I'd driven her to desperation. Others were horrified by what she'd done and felt guilty for not seeing the signs. Emily's family blamed me initially. Her sister called me a week after the sentencing, screaming about how I'd destroyed Emily's life by trapping her in an unhappy marriage. When I calmly explained that Emily had been planning my murder and showed the evidence, the line went quiet. Her sister never called again. I sold our house and moved to Colorado, where I'd always dreamed of living. The mountains reminded me that there was beauty in the world, that not everything was corrupted by human deception. I bought a small cabin outside Denver and started my own plumbing business. The insurance money Emily had tried to claim? The company initially refused to pay anything, given the circumstances. But after a lengthy legal battle, they agreed to pay out the policy minus their legal costs, about $150,000. I donated every penny to a foundation that helps victims of domestic violence. Emily's attempts to profit from my death ended up helping people she would have destroyed. Austin left Detroit and moved back to his hometown in Ohio. The scandal had destroyed his reputation at the gym, and he told Frank he felt guilty about believing Emily's lies about me being abusive. Liam closed his gallery and disappeared, no one knows where he went. Marcus lost his medical license and faced his own criminal charges for the fraudulent medical records. Derek was released after serving 3 years of his 5-year sentence. I heard through Frank that he'd gotten clean in prison and was working at a halfway house helping other addicts. Sometimes justice takes unexpected forms. 6 months after Emily's sentencing, I received a letter from her in prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Dear Kaysen, it began, written in the familiar handwriting I'd once loved seeing on birthday cards and grocery lists. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to try one more time to explain. What followed was 3 pages of self-justification and manipulation. She claimed she'd been mentally ill during our marriage, that the pressures of being a teacher had driven her to make poor choices. She insisted that she never really wanted me dead, that Derek had misunderstood her intentions. Even from prison, even after being caught in lies so extensive they'd taken months to unravel, Emily was still trying to manipulate me. Still trying to rewrite history to make herself the victim. I burned the letter without finishing it. Now, 3 years later, I'm living a quiet life in Colorado. I've dated a few women, but trust comes slowly. I find myself analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for signs of deception. My therapist says this is normal, that it will fade with time, but some scars run deeper than others. I keep in touch with Frank, who retired from private investigation and bought a boat. He sends me pictures from his fishing trips and updates on Emily's appeals, all of which have been denied. She'll be eligible for parole when she's 67 years old. By then, I'll be in my 70s, hopefully with a lifetime of better memories to balance out these dark ones. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that anonymous caller hadn't warned me. If I'd never found the secret chat app, never hired Frank, never discovered the truth. Would Emily have gone through with it? Would I be dead now, remembered as a loving husband who died tragically young, while she lived comfortably on my insurance money with one of her lovers? The thought sends chills down my spine, but it also fills me with gratitude. Gratitude for that unknown caller, for Frank's expertise, for Derek's weakness that made him betray Emily's plan. Gratitude for still being alive to see the sunrise over the Rocky Mountains each morning. I learned that evil doesn't always announce itself with fangs and claws. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you love, someone you trust, someone who kisses you goodnight and plans your death before falling asleep beside you. But I also learned that truth has a way of surfacing, that lies and deception create their own weaknesses, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, often finds its mark. Emily Johnson thought she was smarter than everyone around her. She thought she could manipulate multiple men simultaneously, steal money, forge documents, and commit murder without consequences. She was wrong on all counts. Now I'm building a new life on the foundation of that hard-won truth. It's not the life I planned when I married Emily 9 years ago, but it's honest, it's mine, and no one is trying to take it away from me. But the story doesn't end there. About a year after I moved to Colorado, I received a call from Frank that changed everything once again. He'd been contacted by a woman named Jennifer Walsh from Phoenix, Arizona. Her story sounded eerily familiar. Jennifer's husband had died in what appeared to be a construction accident 6 months ago. A beam had fallen and crushed him while he was working alone in a warehouse renovation. The police ruled it accidental, the insurance paid out, and Jennifer collected $200,000. But Jennifer's sister had become suspicious when Jennifer immediately started dating a personal trainer named Marcus. Yes, the same Marcus who had been Emily's lover and lost his medical license. After Emily's trial made national news, Jennifer's sister recognized Marcus's name and photo in the court documents. Frank's investigation revealed a chilling pattern. After losing his medical license, Marcus had moved to Phoenix and reinvented himself as a grief counselor, specifically targeting recent widows. He'd met Jennifer at a support group just 2 weeks after her husband's death. But the most shocking discovery was that Derek, the hitman Emily had hired, had been released from prison 3 months earlier than expected for good behavior. Prison records showed he'd received multiple visits from a woman using false identification, a woman whose description matched Emily perfectly. It turned out that Emily had been using the prison library computer to research other inmates and had connected with Derek again. She'd convinced him that they both deserved a second chance and had been planning a new scheme from behind bars. The plan was elaborate. Emily would use her charm and intelligence to manipulate Derek from prison, while Marcus would identify wealthy widows and widowers through his grief counseling practice. Derek would arrange accidents, Marcus would provide emotional support to the newly bereaved, and they'd all split the insurance money. Jennifer's husband was their first victim. They'd studied his routine, learned about his work habits, and Derek had weakened the support beam just enough that it would fail under normal stress. It looked completely accidental. Frank contacted the FBI with this information, and a joint task force was formed. They discovered that Marcus and Derek had been communicating regularly since Derek's release, using encrypted messaging apps. They'd already identified their next target, a wealthy contractor in Nevada whose wife had recently died of cancer. The FBI set up a sting operation. They created a fake identity for an undercover agent, a recently widowed businessman with a substantial life insurance policy. The agent joined Marcus's grief counseling group and began building trust. Within 2 weeks, Marcus was asking personal questions about the agent's finances and work schedule. Within a month, Derek had shown up at the agent's workplace, posing as a building inspector and taking detailed photos of the structure. The arrest was coordinated perfectly. FBI agents simultaneously raided Marcus's apartment in Phoenix, Derek's halfway house in Detroit, and even searched Emily's prison cell. They found detailed plans, financial records, and communication logs that proved the conspiracy. Emily was charged with additional crimes related to this new conspiracy, even though she was already in prison. The charges included racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and being part of a criminal enterprise. These new charges essentially guaranteed she would never see freedom again. During her second trial, Emily finally showed cracks in her composed facade. When confronted with evidence of her role in planning Jennifer's husband's murder from prison, she broke down completely. "I never meant for anyone else to die," she screamed in court. "I just wanted Derek to scare them like he was supposed to do with Kaysen. This is all Derek's fault for not following orders." Even then, even facing life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, Emily was trying to shift blame. The prosecutor played recordings of her phone calls from prison where she explicitly discussed killing at least 6 targets before they'd have enough money to retire. Marcus received a sentence of life without parole for his role in the murder conspiracy. During his sentencing, he finally showed genuine remorse, breaking down as he apologized to Jennifer and her family. "I lost everything because of my affair with Emily Johnson," he said through tears. My medical career, my marriage, my children's respect. I thought if I helped her with one more scheme I could start over somewhere new. I never imagined it would lead to more death. Derek was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jennifer's husband. Unlike Marcus, he showed no remorse, blaming his actions on drug addiction and claiming he was manipulated by Emily's mind games. Jennifer Walsh attended Derek's sentencing and gave a victim impact statement that moved everyone in the courtroom to tears. "My husband Tom was the kindest man I've ever known," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious pain. "He worked hard every day to provide for our family. He was planning to retire next year so we could travel together. Emily Johnson and her accomplices didn't just kill him, they stole our future, our dreams, our golden years together." She looked directly at Derek as she continued, "You took away my husband, my children's father, and my grandchildren's grandfather for money. There is no amount of prison time that can balance that equation, but I hope you spend every day of your life sentence remembering what you destroyed." The investigation revealed that Emily's criminal network had been planning to expand nationally. They'd researched wealthy individuals in 12 different states, looking for victims who worked in potentially dangerous occupations. Construction workers, electricians, mechanics, anyone whose death could plausibly be ruled accidental. In Emily's prison cell, investigators found notebooks filled with detailed profiles of potential victims, including their work schedules, family situations, and financial information. She'd been running a murder-for-profit enterprise from maximum security prison, using her intelligence and manipulative skills to coordinate with criminals on the outside. The FBI task force estimated that if they hadn't been stopped, Emily's network could have killed dozens of innocent people over the next few years. The thought still gives me nightmares. 2 years after the second trial, I received another unexpected call. This time it was from Emily's former cellmate, a woman named Rosa who had been released on parole. "I need to tell you something about your ex-wife," Rosa said. "Something she told me that's been eating at me since I got out." We met at a coffee shop in Denver, and what Rosa told me was perhaps the most chilling revelation of all. According to Rosa, Emily had confessed during a late-night conversation that she'd been planning my murder almost from the beginning of our marriage. Not just for the past few years but for nearly the entire 9 years we were together. "She said she married you because you were stable and trusting, but she never loved you," Rosa explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said she started looking for ways to kill you about 2 years into the marriage, but she wanted to wait until you had built up enough assets to make it worthwhile." Emily had apparently bragged about her patience and planning skills. She'd deliberately chosen lovers who could serve specific purposes in her long-term plan. Austin was young and gullible, perfect for providing an alibi. Liam had connections in the art world and could help her disappear after my death. Marcus had medical knowledge and could help stage my death. The most disturbing detail was that Emily had been slowly poisoning me with small doses of antifreeze for months before she decided to hire Derek. The symptoms, fatigue, stomach problems, occasional dizziness, I'd attributed to stress and working long hours. She'd hoped the poisoning would eventually cause organ failure that would look natural, but it was taking too long for her patience. "She laughed when she told me about it," Rosa said, tears in her eyes. "She said watching you get sicker and weaker was almost as satisfying as the money would be. She's not human, Mr. Johnson. She's something else." This explained why I'd been feeling progressively worse during the months before I discovered her affairs. It explained the mysterious stomach problems, the fatigue that wouldn't go away no matter how much I slept, the dizzy spells that I'd ignored because I thought they were just part of getting older. Emily hadn't just been planning to kill me, she'd been slowly murdering me for months while kissing me goodnight and making me breakfast in the morning. The level of calculated cruelty was beyond anything I could have imagined. I reported this information to the authorities, but since Emily was already serving life without parole, there wasn't much more they could do legally. However, this revelation prompted a review of other suspicious deaths in the Detroit area during the years Emily and I were married. The review uncovered 2 cases that warranted further investigation. In both instances, middle-aged men had died of apparent heart attacks, and their wives had collected substantial life insurance payouts. Both widows had connections to Emily through the school where she taught. One was the mother of a former student, who had sought Emily's advice about her marriage problems. The other was a substitute teacher who had worked occasionally at Emily's school. Both had husbands who died within 6 months of their conversations with Emily, and both had received significant insurance payouts. While there wasn't enough evidence to bring charges, the pattern was suspicious enough that these cases remain open investigations. I sometimes wonder how many other people Emily influenced or helped kill over the years, how many families were destroyed by her greed and manipulation. The psychological evaluation conducted during Emily's second trial provided more insights into her mind. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in female sociopaths, spent dozens of hours interviewing Emily. Emily Johnson represents one of the most dangerous types of criminal personality, Dr. Morrison testified. She combines high intelligence with complete lack of empathy and an ability to maintain long-term deception. She views other people as objects to be used for her benefit, and she feels no genuine remorse for the harm she causes. Dr. Morrison's report detailed how Emily had likely been practicing deception and manipulation since childhood. Her high school records, obtained during the investigation, showed a pattern of manipulating teachers and classmates for personal gain. She cheated on exams, stolen money from fundraisers, and spread rumors to damage rivals' reputations. The remarkable thing about Emily Johnson, Dr. Morrison noted, is not that she became a killer, but that she was able to maintain the facade of a normal, loving wife for so many years. This level of sustained deception requires exceptional self-control and planning ability. She's one of the most sophisticated criminals I've ever evaluated. The report concluded that Emily would never be suitable for rehabilitation or release. Her personality disorders were so deeply ingrained and her criminal behavior so calculated that she posed a permanent danger to society. 5 years after Emily's conviction, I finally felt ready to start dating seriously again. I met Sarah, a veterinarian who had moved to Colorado from Oregon after her own difficult divorce. She was kind, honest, and patient with my trust issues. Our first few months together were challenging for me. I found myself analyzing her words, checking her phone when she left it unattended, looking for signs of deception that probably didn't exist. Sarah was understanding but firm. She told me that while she respected my past trauma, I needed to work through my issues if we were going to have a future together. I increased my sessions with my therapist and joined a support group for people who had been betrayed by spouses. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand that while my situation was extreme, the feelings of betrayal and broken trust were universal among survivors of intimate partner deception. Slowly I began to heal. Sarah's consistency and honesty gradually rebuilt my faith in human nature. When she said she'd call, she called. When she made plans, she kept them. When she said she loved me, her actions matched her words. We've been together for 2 years now and we're talking about marriage. It's a conversation that would have been impossible for me a few years ago, but Sarah has shown me that not everyone is capable of Emily's level of deception. Last month, I received one final piece of news about Emily. Frank called to tell me that she'd been stabbed in prison by another inmate during a fight over television privileges. She survived but required extensive surgery and would have permanent nerve damage in her left arm. "Karma's a bitch," Frank said with satisfaction. Apparently, she tried to manipulate the wrong person this time. I felt no satisfaction from this news, only a kind of hollow finality. Emily was no longer my problem, no longer a threat to anyone outside prison walls. She would spend the rest of her life in a concrete box, surrounded by other criminals who saw through her manipulations. Sometimes I still dream about the life we could have had if Emily had been the person she pretended to be. In these dreams, we're older, sitting on our porch watching grandchildren play in the yard. She's gray-haired and wrinkled, but her smile is genuine and her love is real. Then I wake up and remember that person never existed. The woman in my dreams was a fiction, a character Emily created to hide the monster underneath. The real Emily was planning my death while playing that role, counting days until she could collect my insurance money and start a new life built on my grave. But I've learned to find peace in the truth, however painful it might be. Truth doesn't always set you free in the way people say, but it does give you solid ground to stand on. My life now is built on that solid ground of reality, not on the shifting sands of Emily's lies. I've started a non-profit organization that helps people who have been victims of intimate partner fraud and deception. We provide legal assistance, counseling services, and support groups for people trying to rebuild their lives after discovering that their partners were not who they claimed to be. The organization is called Second Chance Foundation, and we've helped over 300 people in the past year. Some were victims of financial fraud, others discovered secret families or hidden addictions, and a few had experiences similar to mine with partners planning violence. Working with other survivors has taught me that resilience is possible, that people can rebuild their lives even after the most devastating betrayals. We've created a community of support that Emily's actions inadvertently brought into existence. In a strange way, Emily's evil has generated something positive. Her attempts to destroy lives have instead created connections between survivors who help each other heal. She wanted to leave a legacy of death and deception, but instead she's inspired a movement of truth and recovery. As I write this, Emily has been in prison for 6 years. She'll die there, forgotten by everyone except her victims and the families she destroyed. She chose a path of manipulation and murder, and now she lives with the consequences of those choices every single day. I chose a different path: truth, healing, and helping others. My life is fuller now than it ever was during my marriage to Emily. I have genuine relationships built on honesty, meaningful work that helps people, and a future with someone who loves me for who I really am. Emily thought she was playing a game where she made all the rules and everyone else was just a pawn to be manipulated. But in the end, truth and justice proved stronger than her lies and schemes. She lost everything, and I found a life better than anything I could have imagined when I was trapped in her web of deception. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.